Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges, as he explores turning the page on his life and yours.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next chapter with Charlie. We're so glad to have you with us. My special guest today is psychoanalyst and author Phyllis Leavitt. And she has written a book that we're going to talk about because I just think it's a fascinating title. I love America in Therapy, if only. As I was looking on Amazon, they wrote sort of a little review of your book that I just thought there was something that, they stated it better than I could. And so they call it, check this out, they call it in the first book of its kind. Now that's an honor to have Amazon say in the first book of its kind. Phyllis Leavitt highlights a crucial missing piece from the national political discourse, the declining state of America's mental health. And the book emphasizes that addressing our nation's ills from a psychological perspective takes us beyond partisanship altogether. Today, we will get into Phyllis's book and the psychological contributions to national healing, as well as the spiritual impact and the role of spirituality in healing. And so I'm very happy about that. So let's bring on our guest, Phyllis Leavitt. Welcome to the next chapter with Charlie.
Well, hello, and thank you so much for having me here with you today.
Yeah, as listeners know, I have a pre-meeting with a guest, and I love to say the pre-meeting, if the show can only go as well as the pre-meeting, we'll have a good show. It was
really fun talking with you yesterday, so I hope that too.
Yeah. So know that I want to begin the show with this simple question. And I want to know more about your book. I'm so enthralled with the title and with the concept. And I must admit, just due to the lateness, I haven't had a chance to read it, but I've read a lot about it. And I want to hear from you why you feel this book is so needed.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking that, because that's why I wrote it, because I do feel it is so needed. I grew up at a time when nobody talked about our psychology or, the roots of our behavior. There were sort of like good people and bad people, successful people and failures, addicts and, people who weren't. And we just kind of accepted that that's the way people were. And there was really no understanding that our conditioning has so much to do with how we function later in life as adults. And it was my own healing journey from childhood trauma that brought me to therapy in the first place in my 30s. And really, I went to a therapy session. I went home because I was always, kind of a student type.
And this is before you were a therapist?
Yes, this is before I became a therapist. I was a mother of 3 young children at that time. And I went to the library and I looked for books on psychology. And the first thing I read in the first book I took out was that our early conditioning has everything to do with what we're dealing with later in life. And there are certain things that really set people up to have a hard time later in life. The loss of a parent, child abuse, neglect, addiction in the home, rage in the home, if a parent leaves and doesn't come back, a custody battle. There are things that really shape how children feel about themselves that they carry with them for better or for worse. And we all know people who have survived terrible odds. But there are also many people who don't. There are many people who don't thrive and who don't survive well. And as a society, we tend to just judge and blame people for their bad behavior, for their addiction, for their acting out, for their failure to thrive in whatever ways they do. And what I realized is that we can understand why we do what we do. And of course, that started for me personally. Once I began to uncover the traumas in my own childhood, I understood why I felt depression, why I felt anxiety, why I felt that there was something really essential inside myself that was blocked and couldn't come out and express itself in the world. And before that, I just really felt like I was a flawed person. And this was life-changing for me to realize that our conditioning has everything to do with how we feel. Yes, we are born with a certain nature. Some people are more artistic or more outgoing or more scientific or more analytical or more into nature or music or more prone to, whatever they are by nature. But nurture is what we have some control over. And what I realized pretty much right away as I was in my own healing journey, I made the decision to become a therapist out of that. And so I went back to graduate school and I got a degree in psychology and I began seeing clients. And a lot of the focus of my training was on family dynamics, because it's looking at family dynamics that helps us understand what are those conditioning agents. What are the role models that people see in their homes for how men treat women and women treat men, how parents treat children? What are the expectations for success? What are the rewards and consequences for certain behaviors? And very, very importantly, how is conflict dealt with? Is there raging? Are people dominating others and forcing them to comply? Are there ways that families listen to each other and hear each other's points of view and actually try to work out their conflict? From my experience in my own childhood and with many of the people that I worked with, we don't have great role models for some of these things. Often there is a certain level of unquestioned expectation of us growing up. You're supposed to become a professional, or you're supposed to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
And
It's the American dream.
right. And so a lot of people don't actually grow up with the conditioning that sets them up for success. And I can tell you from all the years that I've been a therapist, which is over 34 years now, that the amount and the extent of dysfunction and abuse in families today is very high, whether it's emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical violence, sexual assault, or molestation. When people come to therapy and they tell you their stories, what they have been living with and trying to cope with and survive and thrive despite the things that have happened to them, is sometimes mind-boggling what people have had to deal with and the pain that they're trying to cope with and often repress or compensate for, with many different kinds of defense mechanisms, some of which we consider more functional than others.
Yeah, like addictions.
Right.
I'm an alcoholic, so I get that. I come from a very. I was adopted into an incredible family at 7.5 years old. But before 7.5, I lived with abandonment and rejection. And it took a while for me to actually interpret that as negatively impacting my life, because I was, manic depressive and much more, I think they call it bipolar 2, where I'm more depressive than manic. I mean, I do have the manic part, but therapy, and thank God for meds, therapy and a couple of meds. It has been a decade since I've had a depression.
Wow.
But I didn't enter all that. I wonder, were you like close to my age or younger than me, I didn't enter into therapy until I was 40 years old.
I was in my mid-30s. It
Okay,
was after my third child was born.
yeah,
Yeah.
around. So tell me, you know what I'm wondering, Phyllis? We hear a lot about the mental health issues of what I call them kids. I think I'm talking Gen Ys, the 25 and under. Is that Gen Y?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Well, the
Honestly.
25 and under, that, there's so much isolation.
Right.
And is there, what is going on with that? Is it, I can't imagine their parenting was that much different. Do you think that parenting has become different with these kids, or are they just, what's going on with that age group?
Well, let me tell you, because it answers part of the question that you asked earlier about why did I write this book. And the quick answer is having, so much training and so much experience over the years with family dynamics and family conditioning, for better or for worse, that I began to see that all groups of people, and this isn't my idea by myself, but all groups of people are like family systems, and they run on family dynamics. Businesses do. There are people in charge and people that have to follow. There are people that have more power than others. How do they handle that? What are the expectations they have of their workers? Let's just take a business. And what you see is that people tend to play the roles in their larger groupings as adults, whether it's a business or a church or a school, or their community, or if they run for office and they're in government. We tend to play the roles that we learned as children and just repeat what we know. So if a child is in a home that's loving and kind and supportive, and there's good boundaries, and there's a commitment to settle conflict without violence, but for the good, of both the individual and the family as a whole, then you have people who grow up to become adults who bring those values and those skills, for the most part, with them. And those are people you probably really want to work for or have, as a teacher or a principal in your school. But there are many people who grow up with violence, who grow up being told to be quiet, who were beaten if they disagreed or they did something that wasn't approved of, who were just shamed and blamed and told they were stupid, would never amount to anything, or they were fat and ugly. I mean, I've heard so many stories of the messages that people have gotten about themselves that are so destructive and so negative, and they carry those with them into the world. And so there's two quick things I want to say about that. And I wrote quite a bit about this in my book because I feel like it's something that the average person really doesn't know. And I only learned it being a therapist and doing, years of work also on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that we tend to be attracted to people who they may have very good qualities. And there may be things about them that they like, that we like, and that they like about us. But we also tend to be attracted to people who hold some of the qualities that wounded us, and vice versa. We hold some of the qualities that wounded them.
I see that? Where I see that, Phyllis, is with my female friends who are probably divorced, but at 40 and 50, that as they're dating, they're still picking father figures. And we have these discussions and saying, you're selecting, men that are not going to help you, you're not going to be able to relate to. And that is, I think that's the story of abusive families, isn't it? I mean,
that's
abusive,
right.
It's just, and it gets to where, I've phrased it as a bad known is better than any unknown. So I know what this is like. I know how to deal with this. I can cope with this. But then all I do is complain. It's just,
Right.
it's terrible. So that's really, don't you find that that's common in, I don't want to pick on women, but just say my experience with women, in the dating scene, that's very true.
Well, yes, and there's a lot of truth in that. And until we have a chance to heal what hurt us, most people tend to repeat what they've already experienced. And it's driven by our unconscious. And even sometimes when people know, I tend to be attracted to someone who's unavailable or who drinks too much. Even when people know that in their conscious mind, if they haven't healed the wound that is in their unconscious, they tend to repeat it until they have an opportunity to heal. And so that's one of the great gifts of psychotherapy, is that there's a safe place where you can go down into your unconscious and really go into what happened to you and what you made it mean about you that is negative. And it's always negative. If you were hurt, by other people, we make it mean something negative about us. I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. I have no power. I'm invisible. I have no voice. My needs don't matter. These are the things that we carry with us and unconsciously draw to us people who will repeat that. And if I may, for just one moment, I just want to jump out to why my book is America in Therapy, is because America is also a family system. And especially right now, but I think in many ways for many years, the family system of America is very unhealthy. The role models of some of the people in the greatest positions of power are actually the same dynamics of abusive parents and abusive homes, targeting certain individuals, withholding resources, discrimination, outright violence directed at certain people, and then blaming their victims for their symptoms. These are the things that happen in abusive homes. Children are hurt. Let's just say it's a child. A child is hurt. They cry. Then they're blamed for being a crybaby and they're beaten more.
Right.
Or they start being destructive and hitting their siblings or acting out in school. And then they're blamed for that symptom instead of someone saying, what's going on with that child? Why are they so angry? Why are they hitting other children? Or why are they failing to thrive and failing to learn? We just label them as bad. And we do the same thing in our society. The most symptomatic among us are actually calling for help for what they have suffered that is not being addressed by the family of America or the larger family systems they are dependent on and subject to. And this was a groundbreaking revelation for me. And it's actually the one of the main reasons behind writing the book. And there are others.
Phyllis, I got to tell you, it's such a powerful concept because believe me, I have been into personal trauma and dealing with these issues and I've been in therapy since I was 40 and I'm 75. So I see my therapist. I don't see them. I see him once a month. Yeah. And it's just a check-in. And, I won't miss matter of fact, I see him tomorrow. What I'm surprised by, what I'm surprised is not your conclusions. The surprise to me is that I haven't thought of this. And I'm saying, how did I never think of this? That business is like a family unit.
Absolutely.
And that there's aspects of the business that will replicate a family unit. And then to say our political system is a family unit. And that really, and it comes to confidence, goodness. And, but I really agree with your idea of dealing with conflict. There's all of these very negative ways, but tell me what you think the impact of this is. I think there's one methodology that is very common in dealing with conflict, and that is denial, that we just don't talk about it. Dad does this, we don't talk about it. Or if you're doing something, I can't deal with it. Parent says, I can't deal with conflict. So I'm just going to ignore this and hope that it goes away. How does denial and ignoring the issue exacerbate the problem in later age?
Well, I think denial is a huge psychological issue, huge, on the personal level and on the collective level. Because when you deny something, it doesn't go away. It's still there in your psyche. So, I had a client years ago, many, many years ago, who talked about terrible physical violence that he had sustained as a little boy. And he was in a very dysfunctional marriage at the time. And he was really struggling to restrain his own aggressive impulses toward his wife and children. Because he had grown up, well, people just beat each other if they were angry, or the parents beat the kids, right. And he looked at me and he said, "But I deserved it. I was a bad kid." And so we take this on, and we deny, in order to survive, we deny the truth. This is one of a million things we deny, but this is an example. We deny the fact that we weren't loved because it's too painful. It's easier to believe that I must have deserved it, because then I think there must be something I could do about it to become more lovable, rather than know that and feel the pain of, I really wasn't loved. I really wasn't treated. Or maybe my parents even thought they loved me, but they did not know how to behave toward me, in a way that was healthy or loving or supportive or kind, or affirming of who I was as an individual.
You know what strikes me in that too, Phyllis?
Yeah, tell me.
Is there is that feeling that I wasn't loved, but with so many people like that, I don't know that they even think about that, because they have no idea. I mean, the thought doesn't even occur to them, because they have idea what love is.
That's right.
They have no idea what a loving relationship means. It calls for a whole redefinition of love, and a whole definition of dealing with conflict. And
that's right.
And then, it's also, it gets into, I will, if I feel I deserved the kinds of treatment that I got, then I'm redefining my identity. My identity is now a bad person. My identity is a person that's disgusting, or, as a matter of fact, those used to be my words at one time. I defined myself as disgusting. I was just quiet and private. I was successful in business. I did all of these things, but the deep inside part of me has felt that I truly wasn't accepted.
Right. And, in some way you weren't. It was actually the trauma that you sustained. You weren't accepted in a loving, healthy, boundary, supportive way. And so you took that on. And that's what happens when people are mistreated by other human beings, and particularly by the people they depend on for their life. And so the denial becomes, we live, there's so many aspects to denial, but the first thing I wanted to say is that when you deny something, it doesn't go away. It's just like if a scab covers an infection, the infection doesn't go away, and it's going to get worse until it explodes. And we are the same way. We deny, the pain, we deny the negative things that we've come to believe about ourselves, or we try to look good in the world because we feel like we're supposed to, and we feel like that's the only way to survive, is to create some kind of acceptable persona for other people. And then eventually something explodes, whether it's inward as depression, whether it's addiction, whether it's rage, whether it's excessive workaholism or people pleasing, or just, can't keep a job, can't have a good relationship, act out on our children. what is denied doesn't go away, and it creates symptoms somewhere. And I just want to zoom out to the larger society. What we deny that we're doing as a culture, as a society, as a political system, what we deny as how we discriminate against certain people or tolerate vast economic injustice or criminal injustice, without a desire to help people heal, create symptoms in the society that explode. Where do we think mass murderers come from? They weren't born that way. No baby is born a mass murderer. Something happens to that child that is so egregious, that is so painful, that so disconnects them from their own humanity or fills them with so much rage that they explode. Of course, we don't like the results of that. We don't want that. We cry for the innocent people that they killed. But unless we're willing to look as a society at what the family of America is actually doing that's producing this kind of symptomology, it's going to repeat.
You said something that is that's very, very strong with me, and that is when somebody, you'll take a mass murderer, you just take somebody who does something inappropriate or whatever, and the question is, how in the world could they do that? And I like to say, wrong question. The right question, and you stated it, the right question is, what happened to them?
That's right.
That drives them to do this. Something happened in
That's
their
right.
life that drives them to do that. You know what I want to get? I want to take a little bit of a deep dive into a little. It's an aspect of this that is just occurring to me as we're talking, and you talk a lot about healing, and I think we don't understand healing. Healing
Right.
is not like Jesus, and you've got a disease, and Jesus heals you of the disease, and you go around all fine. Mental healing doesn't work that way. Mental healing is different. What does it mean to be healed, and what's a healing process even look like?
Yeah. Well, I think there are several aspects to it, and I probably can't say them all now or even think of them all now, but
Sure.
I'll tell you the ones that really stand out for me. One of them is that, and this is a huge sort of condensation that I've come to after all the years of being a therapist and doing my own personal work, and that is that if I look at every single person I've ever worked with and all the people I know well, what is at the root of all their symptomology, whether it's depression or anxiety or rage or whatever it is, what's at the root is some injury to love and safe belonging, period. It all comes down to that. It takes many different forms, the way the injury to love and safe belonging can unfold in a person's life. But that's what I've discovered. If you dig deep enough, there was an injury, and sometimes a severe injury, to love and safe belonging, like no love and no safe belonging.
Right.
And I've had clients who were never told they were loved, who were never safe. They were beaten or molested or, shoved into closets or locked out of the house from their earliest
How do you
memories.
go about healing? How do they go about, what is the healing process for someone who's gone through that much tragedy?
Well, one of the key elements is holding a place of love and safe belonging around that person. If the injury comes from, some harm to love and safe belonging, the healing comes from introducing love and safe belonging. And what that means, let's just talk about a therapy situation, that the therapist needs to hold that they hold the essential person that person was born to be, as an infant, They know that there's an essential human being who is not what happened to them or not what they've done inside them. And we just hold that in our being, and we hold a space of non-judgment. Non-judgment is critical to the process. And then listen to the story. People have to be able to tell their story without being like, why did you do that? Or, oh my God, that's, how could you ever have done that when that was done to you? Or, just
don't you?
that.
You should know better because you've experienced it.
Right.
No, I do it because I've experienced it. And it's not know better. It's all I know.
That's right.
That is all I know.
Right. And that is not common knowledge. And that's one of the hundreds of reasons why I wrote the book, because it's not common knowledge that we do what we know. And if what we know is awful, we might do awful things. And if we're not doing them to other people, we're probably doing them to ourselves.
That I think you're bang on there. We're doing them. We're doing them to ourselves for sure. For sure. So part of healing is acknowledging a lack of love. And I like this, that the therapist's role and my role as a friend is to be an agent of, may I use the word, sort of unconditional love, that I'm just going to accept you as you are. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you've done. There is a part of you that exudes goodness, and I want to tap into that and work with you on that. I had my first therapist. I've only had two, and I had one. He just got old. Yeah, he was older than me, and he told me one time in therapy, he told me our role of therapy. I said, "What was this all about?" Our role, and he says, we've got two roles. The first role is the first goal, or sort of, is I want to get you to love me, get you to accept me, and get you to understand my caring and my softness. And then from that, we will get you to love yourself, because you have to define love. You have to understand what it is. So you understand it by loving someone else, and then say, I need to switch that over to loving myself. And that's not an easy deal. Truly loving yourself is not an easy deal, but age really helps.
Well, and what I found is nobody does it perfectly. We do our best, but we don't have to do it perfectly. Any therapist, let's just say, or friend, who can hold a space of love and acceptance around another person and want to know their story and believe them, and believe, that's a big part of it, because many people have tried to tell what happened to them and they weren't believed, or it was minimized. Oh, get over it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and move on. That was the past. We need to be believed in our wounds and in our pain. Being believed helps awaken that part of ourselves that's underneath, that we've pushed down in order to survive, our essential self. And so telling our story to a safe person in a safe place who cares about our welfare and wants to see us thrive, and I can't emphasize that enough, it's an unbelievable gift to be in the presence of someone who sees your essential self and wants to see you flower and supports you to flower.
Do they teach that in psychology?
No.
They don't teach that, do
I
you?
learned it.
Yeah, and that's like the key to everything. That's it. If a psychologist could do that, or a psychiatrist could do that, create an atmosphere of love, you're going to have a good therapy session.
Yeah, that's
or
right.
a good therapy process.
That's right. So if an injury to love is our greatest wound, how can we heal without love being brought back into the arena of our healing process? It can't happen. We can do some work. There are therapists who don't embody that, and I think they do some good work. But for me, that's the essence of what I want to see happen, not only in a therapy situation, but in the world.
Yeah, it gets once you learn to accept it and do it, then you are a contributor.
That's right.
So the idea, if I'm getting this right, and you are said, I'm thinking of 35 years of therapy, so I've seen this movie, and I'm thinking the situations are every therapy session with my therapist now, especially, it is created an environment of openness and acceptance. I can be, it's one of those people. I have him and I have my best friend that they know there's not a lot of secrets. So they can't know everything. There's not a lot of secrets,
Right.
but it's totally accepted. It's never, why are you doing that? How could you do that? Okay,
Right.
let's figure out a way to stop that. It's just, this is who you are. So let's accept that and deal with that. So if the role of therapy is to create a tangible example of what love is and what a loving and accepting and caring and non-judgmental experience would be like, then I have an experience that I can take forward. Otherwise, it's just talk. It's just talk. We just keep, there's something else going on.
And when you say take forward, the words I think of are, I've internalized it. I've gotten that gift from you. I didn't grow up with it, but I got that gift from you, your unconditional love or your acceptance of me or your desire to see me thrive in the world. I take that with me. I internalize it. And that actually begins to heal the wounds and the negative messages that I internalized to begin with. And I start to internalize much more positive things about myself. So am I going to go out in the world then and beat a child? No, because that whole trance has been undone. And so it's really healing that inner child in ourselves or the wounded part of ourselves and bringing love and acceptance. And there's a lot of things to that. There's good boundaries. There's peaceful conflict resolution skills. There's, you and I are actually equal. I might need you to be the professional in my life, but I know you as an equal human being, and you treat me as an equally worthy human being. As I internalize those things, the negative hold of the role models that hurt me when I was a child and the traumas that I sustained, they're no longer running the show. And I become a more loving human being, a more cooperative human being.
Let me throw an interesting, a personal anecdote. I was for 7.5 years. I in the audience, bear with me. I know you've heard this before, but there's I lived with 3 or 4 different families. My father and mother were divorced, and my mother worked a graveyard shift and couldn't take care of me, and so would give me to a family, and the family would say, I'd be there for a month, and they say, do you want to live with us for the rest of your life? And I said, of course, this is like a family. This is cool. And then only to find out weeks later, I'd be shipped off to another place. So obviously the message was I was unworthy. Now, my sister, who was 13 years older than I, so she was 20 years old, she helped me run away. At this time, I was living with my alcoholic father, who drank a quart of liquor a day. But he was loved. He loved me to death, but he was a drunk. He was incapacitated. And so I ran away, and I ran to an aunt and uncle. And let me tell you this story. This aunt and uncle, this aunt is a goddess. That's what started me into therapy. It was in 1990. I was 40 years old. She died. That's when therapy came along, because it was as if God died. It was all love. So I had both. I went from this very difficult upbringing to this incredible love. And I have this story that my sister pulled up in her car in the afternoon, 1957, and I got out of the car with my suitcase, which was like, 18 inches by 6 inches, it had everything I owned. And I walked up, and those were the days when you could hose down your driveway. We weren't water conscious like we are now. And so my Uncle Jim was hosing down the driveway, and I went up to him and I said, "Hi, Uncle Jim, I've come to live with you." Those are the first words out of my mouth. And his response? "Welcome home, son."
Oh.
Can you believe? And so that makes me bipolar. That's what brought on my bipolar. I had the loving, caring. I got what that was about. I got the acceptance. I got, my mom was incredible, yet I still had these early years of a dark side that, just continued on with me for too long and influenced me. I'd have both sides. I literally had the demon and the angel on my shoulder.
Yeah.
Is that really uncommon?
Well, I think that we internalize our experience in different ways, but that certainly would be one understandable way. And that's actually a good point, because most people get inconsistent messages. We don't usually get all one message. If you're in a highly abusive home and you've just stayed there, you've gotten a consistent message that you're not loved, that you're not protected, that you're not worthy, it's your fault, whatever you've gotten. But a lot of us get mixed messages. Sometimes it's loving and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're okay and sometimes, you're rejected. And we have a hard time, digesting all that and putting the pieces of ourselves together. So, on a continuum, a person who's very mild and loving and kind of caring can also have explosive moments when a piece of their wounding reaches the surface or is triggered by something that's happening. But I think the big point is, from what you're saying, is that, you're a perfect representation of what I was talking about earlier. Our conditioning has everything to do with what we then have to deal with later in life. And I just, again, want to zoom out to our country for just a moment and come back, that we have untold numbers of people who have been hurt, who have been discriminated against, who have sustained violence, institutional violence, police violence in the criminal justice system, racial violence, gender violence, who have no opportunity to heal. And they are symptomatic. And they are out in the world manifesting their symptoms outwardly and inwardly and acting them out in their families. And so for me, looking at us as a family of America, and how can we heal the family of America? How can we heal our institutions? This is not a partisan issue. This is a mental health issue. It cuts across party lines. It has nothing to do with ideology. It has everything to do with how we treat each other.
Oh, that's so beautifully said. I so concur. I concur with everything you said thus far. You know what I'd like to do now is I want to keep on this subject, but I want to take a little bit different approach, because you bring this integration or interrelationship between psychology and spirituality. And as we talked about, spirituality is very high on my list of I study with the mystics and pray with the mystics, but I love this idea of integration of psychology and spirituality. I've talked to other psychologists about it, but I've got a feeling you have a take on this. Just having talked to you for a while, I got a feeling you're going to have a rare take on this. You're going to have a different insight. So,
well, I have a couple of things that come to my mind right away, and it is a very dear subject to me. Because long before I went to therapy or considered anything about psychology, I was on a spiritual path myself. I had many spiritual experiences as a child that kind of, inserted themselves in some of the harm and pain that I was experiencing. I would just have these unbelievable experiences of what I call them grace. I don't actually know the exact words to describe these experiences, but it was as if I was just enveloped in divine love and just a part of something that was so much bigger, even than human. It was just divine. And I think those experiences actually kept me going in a certain way because I always wanted more and I wanted to recreate them. And I ended up following a number of spiritual teachers when I was quite young. And one of the things that I realized later on, especially after I got into the world of psychology, was that we bring our wounds with us no matter where we go. So we bring our psychology, we bring our issues into the world of spirit, just like we bring them into business, into family, into education, and into government. And so if I'm somebody whose wounds manifested as helplessness, I freeze in the face of danger or threat or anger, I'm going to bring that dynamic to the spiritual group I'm in, to my idea about God. I may be submissive to a dogma or to a spiritual leader. That has nothing to do with spirituality in my book. It has to do with an unhealed wound that's playing out in the spiritual arena. And I'll give you another example that I think is probably more obvious. Many people come out of the dysfunction of their homes when they haven't had a chance to heal with a dynamic that in the world of psychology we call identification with the aggressor. They'll do anything not to be one down. They have to be top dog because they're so afraid of being hurt again that unconsciously they've identified with the aggression of the person that has hurt them, and they become the aggressor in their family or in their business or in their church. And often people who have identified with the aggressor, and this is not always true, but this is sometimes true, look for positions of power because they have to be in control. Yeah. They have to dominate in order to survive.
Phyllis, is that narcissism or is that different than narcissism?
Well, it can include narcissism because, all of these characteristics happen on a continuum. So on a farther end of the continuum, where I see myself, let's just say I'm somebody who's identified with the aggressor, I look for a position of power. I have to be in control in order to feel like I can make it and survive, and I will never let anyone dominate me because that's how I got hurt. It can be the narcissistic part of that is that I don't care about you. I only care about holding on to my power or being in control or having it my way. And so that manifests as a kind of very destructive narcissism because that person then cannot feel the impact of how they behave on other people. And we see this everywhere in human, really all over the world today, with many people who have attained great positions of power who have no empathy whatsoever for the people that they're hurting or controlling or dominating.
I have a person that I worked with who is filled with compassion, working with the poor, taking care of the poor. Outrageously, runs an organization that does that. And so everything this individual does is based on taking care, it's just care for the poor and bringing them, doing what he can with the poor. However, along with this, when it came to his employees, they didn't get love. It was odd that he could love the people we serve, but his employees were viewed as employees. You're getting paid to do this. You're getting paid to act this way. This is what I expect. This is what I demand. And it made for a very, very difficult workplace. But it was somebody who had who had obviously had some childhood, and I have no idea what the childhood experiences are, but had some childhood experience that he could recover goodness in certain areas, but when it came close, when it came now, like you're talking the business becoming a family, it's not a service, it's a family. And this is the way families act. I've never even thought about it in those terms, but that's, Phyllis, thank you. That's brilliant.
Yeah. And so what happens, and we see this all the time, unconsciously, people seek out a way to be in a role that they're familiar with. So if someone is familiar with the identification with the aggressor, they're going to look for a role where they can be in control and powerful. Now, that doesn't mean everybody who is in a role of power and authority is an aggressor and hurts other people.
No. There's plenty of wonderful leaders.
Exactly. But there are many people who do. And that's what we have to look at in our society. And on the same vein, there are many people who decided unconsciously in response to the harm they were receiving to be passive because fighting back only made it worse. And so their response to threat or cruelty or domination or aggression is to freeze or submit or comply or try to disappear. And unfortunately, and based on exactly what you were saying in the beginning, we are attracted to what we know. So someone who's passive tends to be attracted to someone who's dominating, and someone who's dominating tends to be drawn to people they can dominate. And to the extent that we are not looking as a family of America, as communities, as big institutions, whatever they are, whether it's a business or a church or whatever, to the extent that we're not looking at how those dynamics play out and really trying to heal them through the best that psychology has to offer, which would be a great thing for us to talk about here, we're just creating more and more people who want to dominate and people who are easily dominated. And that's a recipe for what we're seeing in our country today.
Oh, you're right on. I so agree. Let's begin to wrap it up. But what I do want to do, let's close with what you said about implementing. What suggestions do you have for people who know there's something amiss in their behavior, something amiss in the way they're viewing people, and they normally are. I mean, they're attracted to certain kinds of behaviors, but at the same time, they're repelled by them. But they don't spend a lot of time thinking about that. What kind of suggestions do you have for people going through that?
Well, an obvious one would be therapy, because often that's what brings people to therapy. They keep exactly what you had said in the beginning with your friends, seeing people repeat what they've experienced, even though it hurts them, even though it's not functional. And it's usually the pain of that kind of repetition that is compulsive but not healthy that brings people to therapy in the first place. So if therapy is a great place to, like, how did I get this way? What is this pattern I'm acting out? And then, you look at what happened to you. What were the role models in your home? What did you take away from that? What were the messages you got about yourself? What were the traumatic experiences you had? How did you interpret them? What were your coping mechanisms? And in processes like hypnotherapy or guided visualization or EMDR or inner child work of some kind, and there's so many different processes that people, can do now, you begin to unravel that whole unconscious substructure of what is driving your personality choices and decisions and coping mechanisms, so that you can actually make different choices. And I think that's one of the big reasons why good psychotherapy is so helpful, because you come out of it able to make different choices in your own behavior, in the people you associate with in the decisions you make, in what you pursue in your life, all of that. And I've never seen anybody do any healing work from the wounds of their childhood who became more hateful or more violent or more unaccepting. It just doesn't happen.
And do you know, the beauty of therapy and the beauty of what you're talking about is that so many people don't know there's an alternative.
That's right.
They don't know, because this is who they are. This is how they've identified. And what you're suggesting is to know there is hope. There is another road. There is another path.
Yeah.
That and it's never too late. You know, I am so fortunate. I have looked at every day, every decade is better than the decade that precedes it for me. And I'm finding the same thing in my septuagenarian decade, that I'm loving this decade, and I'm finding out things about myself, Phyllis, that are shocking. And it is just, I am becoming so much more comfortable, so much less productivity oriented, and just being and listening and observing and watching, and is trying to be what our role is, what your role and my role is, and we often don't even admit it, but our role, we're elders.
Right. Right.
And I don't mean old, right. I mean wise. There is something, and it is not this kind of wise that we dictate everybody do what we say, but we demonstrate. I want to be, my goal is to be a demonstration of kindness.
Yeah.
That is it. I just want to, I try to, and it's quite simple. I just want to be nice. I try to be nice to people, try to enjoy them, try to encourage them, uplift them. And that creates an aura around me of people that are like that as well.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And you spread that, when you give that to other people and they absorb it, there's a greater likelihood that once they absorb that from you, they give that out to the world around them. If I may, can I say something just quickly that I forgot to say about the integration of psychology and spirituality? And that is that we tend to look for the kind of God that is similar to the parent we internalize. If we internalize a loving parent, we're probably going to look for a concept of God or a presence of God that's loving and accepting and supportive. And if we internalize an abusive, discriminatory, judging, unsupportive parent, it's possible for some people that their definition of God becomes someone who's holding the fire of hell and brimstone over their head.
Oh my God! And look at the people that are attracted to that. I mean,
exactly.
A huge population of people are attracted to that, and it's because they view life as a problem to be solved, and that we have the answer, and only we have the answer, and you must do it our way, and that just doesn't work.
Exactly, and it's a world of judgment, which for me is the exact opposite of everything that I've experienced that I would call divine. I've never had that experience of any kind of judgment, ever. I am loved for who I am. And that love fills me, and I want to give it the best that I can.
Well, you're doing that, and I want to thank you. Thank you for the book. Thank you for being on the show with me. It is such an honor to have you, and I think you've given such words of wisdom today, Phyllis Leavitt. I adore what you have to say.
Oh, well, thank you so much, and you're an amazing host. And an amazing person to have the conversation with, because I feel like we have come to some very similar conclusions and ways of wanting to be in the world. And that's always a light in the world to meet our fellow travelers.
It's nice to swim in the same pond. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. And then, time I want to thank everybody for tuning into the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.